Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be comparing the Pagani design PD-1661 Starbucks versus the Steeldive 1953 Starbucks. The PD-1661 is available from Pagani Design Choice Store on AliExpress for €78. The SD1953 is available from Steeldive Store on AliExpress for €80. So they are both at the same price point in the low tier, €78 and €80 respectively. So firstly, let's look at the boxes that the watches come in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the pieces. So the Pagani design comes in this cardboard box, and inside the watch sits on a piece of sponge inside a sponge cutout panel, as one would expect. It does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping, and it is acceptable in the low tier at this price point of €78 to use a cardboard watch box. With regards to the items you get with the watch, you get this branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth, irrespective of the price point of a piece. You also get this warranty card, as you can see. Now on the reverse, it's blank, it's not filled in, but I'm pleased to report the PD-1661 is covered by a 12-month international guarantee. This is the plastic tag, and as you can see, it has Pagani design embossed with a Pagani design shield emblem. And you also get this 1.6mm flat bladed screwdriver for resizing the screw pin bracelet links. And lastly, you also get this owner's instruction manual in the form of a booklet, clear concise diagrams. The instructions are in English and it details the operation of the movement used, which is the Seiko NH35A automatic. So let's do the same with the Steeldive. The SD1953 comes in this black plastic pelican style case, which is clearly better quality than the cardboard box used by Pagani Design for the PD-1661. 4 plastic clips, I'll show you the interior. So in the underside of the hinge lid we have a foam protective panel, and in the base we have a second foam protective panel, and the 2 pieces of sponge foam do a good job of protecting the watch in shipping from any damage. So of the two, the Steeldive SD1953 watch box is clearly better quality than the cardboard PD-1661 watch box. Now bear in mind, these are both the same price point, €78 and €80 respectively. Steeldive have the edge with regards to the packaging. So let's look at the items that come with the SD1953. This is the plastic warranty card, and on the reverse it's blank, which is the same as the PD-1661, and I'm pleased to report it's covered by a 12-month international warranty, which is good. So they both have the same 12-month warranty. This is the owner's instruction manual, which is also in a booklet form. Clear concise diagrams, the instructions are in English and it details the operation of the movement used, which is the Seiko NH35A automatic. You also get this tag, which has Steeldive on it, as you can see. And lastly, you also get this plastic pushpin bracelet resizing tool. This does work to a satisfactory standard, and it's good to get this included. So in terms of the boxes, Steeldive has the edge. In terms of the accessories, they are equal, both very similar accessories with the watches, but I think Steeldive deserve credit for a better quality black plastic pelican style case versus the cardboard box of the PD-1661. So with regards to dimensions, I'll do the PD-1661 first and then the Steeldive 1953, and then I will compare the two. So we have 40mm case diameter, we have a lug-to-lug measurement of 48.3mm, a thickness of 12.9mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the flip-lock clasp. So now let's do the SD1953. 40mm case diameter, we have a lug-to-lug measurement of 47.5mm, a thickness of 13.8mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 18mm at the flip-lock clasp. So the most notable differences in dimensions that you need to be aware of are the bracelet tapers. They both have a 20mm lug width and both have male end links, but the taper is significantly different. The Pagani design PD-1661 on the left tapers from 20 to 16, so it's 2mm thinner at the flip-lock clasp. The SD1953 on the right tapers from 20 down to 18, so 2mm less taper at the flip-lock clasp. Now, I think Steeldive have made a mistake by using a 20 to 18 taper because it adds too much meat to the oyster style bracelet links, as you can see, there's a big difference, 16mm at the clasp versus 18. The correct taper would be 20 to 16, which is the industry standard. 22 to 18 is the other industry standard. 20 to 18 isn't so popular because it's not as aesthetically pleasing. The negative of this having more meat on the bracelet is there is a significant difference in the heft of the two pieces. Now bear in mind they're both 40mm head of the pieces, so you would expect them to be a very similar heft because they both use similar oyster style bracelets, but there's a significant difference. The PD-1661 on the left is 152 grams with all the links in the bracelet. The SD1953 on the right is much heavier. The heft is 179 grams. So just think about that for a moment. 152 grams with the PD-1661 versus 179 grams with the SD1953. So the problem with that is this feels like a very heavy piece, and when you wear it for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day, it's noticeable on wrist. You can really feel the heft. 179 grams is uncomfortable. 150 grams is the sweet spot for a 40mm head of the piece, and at 152 the PD-1661 does feel better balanced, it feels more comfortable, and it doesn't feel top heavy or uncomfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. So in terms of comfort level, wearing the watches for long periods of time, the PD-1661 has the edge over the SD1953 due to the massive difference in heft, 152 grams versus 179 grams. So, with regards to the specifications, we have a flat sapphire crystal with no AR coating. This is something to note with regards to the PD-1661. It does have sapphire crystal in the exhibition case back on the back. It's mineral crystal as a cost-cutting measure, which is acceptable, but lack of AR coating is a cost-cutting measure too far. When I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see the negative. It does have a lot of glare and highly reflective nature due to the silver mirror polished applied indices and the silver mirror polished Mercedes handset. This really does need AR coating on the underside. Just look at the amount of glare you get. There's no AR coating on the underside of the Cyclops magnifier, and there's no AR coating on the underside of the sapphire crystal itself. So lot of glare to it. This is a real cost-cutting measure negative. Now, on a positive note, the SD1953 does have AR coating, and it has AR coating on the underside of the Cyclops magnifier and also on the underside of the sapphire crystal. Now, when I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, there is also a lot of glare and highly reflective nature due to the silver mirror polished applied indices and silver mirror polished Mercedes handset, but it does have AR coating. And the AR coating does make a difference. It does give better legibility and better clarity. When I tilt the piece at an oblique angle, the AR coating does reduce some of the glare and some of the reflection. So, in terms of specification, the SD1953 is better than the PD-1661. The other notable difference is water resistance. The SD1953 has 300 meters, which is strong specification at this price point. The PD-1661 only has 100 meters, which is disappointing. So the SD1953 has 3 times the water resistance of the PD-1661, 300 meters versus 100 meters, but they're at the same price point in the low tier. €78 and €80 respectively. The other notable difference I want you to be aware of, which I consider to be a negative, is if you look at the Cyclops magnifiers on both sapphire crystals. On the left, the Pagani design PD-1661 has a 2.5 times magnification, which is correct. This is an homage to the Rolex Submariner date Starbucks, which also has a 2.5 times magnification. Steeldive have made a mistake. It's 3 times magnification. They've over-magnified the date complication. Now, if you look at the 16th day of the month on both of the date wheels, you can see 2.5 times on the PD-1661 looks correct. It's legible, but it's not over-magnified. If you look at the 16th of the month on the SD1953, you can see it's too enlarged, and it actually distorts the legibility of it. It reduces the legibility because it's over-magnified at 3 times. It's not 2.5 times as per Rolex Submariner date. It is 3 times. It's too much magnification, and it makes the Arabic numerals too large and reduces the legibility. So Pagani Design deserve credit because the 2.5 times Cyclops magnification is correct. Steeldive have a negative of 3 times. They've got it incorrect. Now, with regards to the 2 dial finishes, the Dials are both Rolex Submariner date Starbuck style layouts, so they have the classic maxi dial layout. The proportions of the Mercedes hands are very similar, so they've got the quality of the printing on the dial very good. Both of the logos, in terms of the Steeldive emblem and the Pagani Design Shield emblem, are printed in white paint with high definition. The fonts used on Pagani Design and Steeldive for the logos are very similar. The size is correct, the proportions are good, the legibility is good. I personally prefer the dial layouts in terms of the text on the Steeldive SD1953 because we simply have automatic 300M for 300 meters, just the right amount of information. Pagani Design have cluttered the dial because we've got 3 lines of information. At 6 o'clock we have automatic, water resistant, 10 bar/100 meters. We don't need to have water resistant on the dial. It's a given that this piece is water resistant, and of course 10 bar/100 meters is obviously referring to it being water resistant. So it's negligible information to have water resistant on a dive piece. They simply should have the water resistance rating only 100 meters. They also don't need to put 10 bar/100 meters. It's a given that 10 bar is 100 meters of hermetic seal. So Steeldive have done a better job. Automatic and 300 meters is just the right amount of information. Pagani Design have cluttered the dial, which detracts from it. But in terms of the legibility, the applied indices on both pieces are correctly proportioned. The legibility is good. The white minute ticks on both chapter rings are equal quality. And the contrast of the handset, the indices and the black dials is also very good. The negative of them both being NH35A powered is they both have deep rehauts, and that's a characteristic often of low tier Chinese watches. The NH35A has a tall cannon pinion stack height for the handset, and therefore it needs a deep rehaut in order to provide adequate clearance beneath the flat sapphire crystal and the second hand on the top of the cannon pinion. So you can see there's a very deep brushed satin finish to the rehaut on the SD1953, and it's very similar proportions on the PD-1661. It also has a very deep brushed satin finish stainless steel rehaut. This could be further enhanced if they both use the Miyota 9015, which is a lower profile movement with a lower cannon pinion stack height for the handset. But at this price point, one is going to expect the NH35A, and unfortunately the negative is a deep rehaut on both pieces. The negative of the deep rehaut is the dials sit far away from the underside of the sapphire crystal, and that reduces the legibility and it compounds the problem of the reflection and the glare. Even though the SD1953 uses AR coating, the PD-1661 doesn't have it, but the dials are quite far away from the underside of the sapphire crystals due to the depth of the rehaut. That is the negative of the NH35A. So let's look at the case finishing. Flanks of the case are mirror polished to a high standard, no sharp edges to the undercuts. The chamfers and deburring is done very well on the PD-1661 head of the piece. Crown guards are very well mirror polished, and also the undercuts of the case is very good. No sharp edges, no burrs, doesn't have sharp tips to the lugs. So the quality of the finishing to the head of the piece on the PD-1661 is excellent, and they deserve full credit for this at the price point. Now, with regards to the SD1953, very similar quality finishing. Flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. Nice chamfering and deburring to the edges of the case. The undercut of the case doesn't have any sharp edge. No sharp corners to the tips of the lugs. On the crown guard side, flawless mirror polishing to the crown guards. So every facet of the case is deburred and chamfered to a very good standard. The brushed satin finishing to the tops of the lugs is done to a good standard. The mirror polishing is done to a good standard. So they really are equal in terms of head of the piece finishing. But in terms of the proportions, I want you to note some differences. There are some notable differences. They both have 40mm cases, but there is a notable difference in proportions with the length of the cases. This PD-1661 is a longer case, 48.3 lug to lug. Now, the SD1953 is slightly more compact. It's 47.5 lug to lug. I often refer in my reviews as 48mm as being the sweet spot. That is the perfect lug-to-lug measurement for all wrist sizes. So regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively, 48 will fit you to perfection. So at 47.5, it's slightly below the 48mm sweet spot, but acceptable. This one, the PD-1661, is slightly long at 48.3, and I think Pagani Design should slightly reduce it down to 48 to get it down to the perfect lug to lug, but at 48.3 it's very close to the sweet spot. Slightly long, and this one is slightly short. But in terms of comfort level, they will fit you if you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist, because they are both close to the 48mm sweet spot. Now, I'll give you wrist shots of both pieces because there's something else with regards to the dimensions I want you to be aware of. It's a negative of the SD1953 and a positive of the PD-1661 respectively. So just bear with me and I'll open the clasp. Right, so PD-1661 first. This feels better on wrist. Feel good factor is better, comfort level is better, wearing it for long periods of time. Why is that? This is 12.9mm thick. Again, I often refer in my reviews, the sweet spot for a 40mm head of the piece is 13mm or less. 13mm means the head of the piece will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. Now, this is only 12.9, so slightly below the 13mm sweet spot. Needless to say, it will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff as a result. So Pagani Design deserve credit because 12.9 is low profile. But of course, this is only 100 meters, so it has a thinner sapphire crystal and a thinner exhibition case back as a result. If this were 200 meters or 300 meters of hermetic seal, it would need a thicker sapphire crystal and a thicker exhibition case back. 100 meters means they've been able to slim it down. So 12.9 is very good. Low profile, sits very close to the wrist. Now, the negative of male end links is there is a large gap beneath the tips of the lugs, and also the end link in the oyster style bracelet doesn't articulate as per female pivoted end links, but it is an homage to the Rolex Submariner date Starbucks, which also has male end links. So naturally they've copied that rather than using female pivoted end links. So very comfortable piece to wear due to the flat mineral crystal in the exhibition case back, so it does fit very snug. The thing I like about this, and it gives a better feel-good factor and also looks better on wrist aesthetically, 20 to 16 is the perfect taper for a 40mm head of the piece. Very aesthetically pleasing, but it also reduces the meat and the heft on the oyster style bracelet. Something to bear in mind, 152 grams is very close to the 150 grams sweet spot for a 40mm head of the piece. So they've got the taper correct, the proportions of the case look good, the thickness is good at 12.9. So Pagani Design has the edge with regards to comfort level, feel good factor and proportions. Now let's do the same with the SD1953, because there is a negative I want you to be aware of with regards to the proportions. This is thicker at 13.8. It's nearly 1mm thicker. And it really is noticeable. It's due to the bubble back case back, which provides 300 meters. Now, this is 3 times more water resistant. 300 meters on the SD1953 versus 100 meters on the Pagani Design PD-1661. Thicker sapphire crystal, thicker bubble back case back. But the negative of the bubble back case back is look at the gap on the undercuts of the flanks to the case. We've got a larger gap underneath the tips of the lugs, and the end link in the bracelet, the oyster style bracelet, doesn't pull close to the wrist. So it sits more on top of the wrist, rather like a slab of 316L grade stainless steel, rather than wrapping around the wrist. The PD-1661 curves around the wrist more, and it sits more snug to the wrist due to the flatter case back. The exhibition case back is flat in the centre, it doesn't have a bubble back profile. Now, the other thing to note is, apart from the thickness, this is 13.8, so it's going to be more difficult to slip underneath the shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. It's well in excess of the 13mm sweet spot, nearly a millimetre too thick at 13.8. The Pagani Design is 12.9, so nearly 1mm thinner, something to bear in mind. The taper is noticeably incorrect. 20 to 18 is too much meat on the bracelet links. The bracelet looks too straight and parallel. 2mm of taper isn't enough. 20 to 16 on the PD-1661 looks better. 20 to 18 just doesn't look like enough taper. It's too thick at the clasp. The bracelet adds too much heft to the piece. 179 grams is a very heavy 40mm piece. And it really is noticeable. The 152 grams of the PD-1661 feels good. It feels balanced and it feels comfortable to wear for long periods of time. This 179 grams of the SD1953 feels too heavy. It feels top heavy, doesn't feel balanced, and the bracelet feels very heavy on wrist. And it doesn't feel balanced because the clasp is light, but the bracelet is heavy. So really, the Pagani Design has the edge for comfort and feel good factor. There's something else to note with regards to proportions which I want you to be aware of. Now, the bezel proportions are better done on the PD-1661, and I'll show you why I say that, because they're a similar diameter, but there is something I've noticed which I want you to know. If you look at the left-hand flank of the PD-1661, you can see the scalloped bezel is correctly proportioned because it's flush with the left-hand flank of the case. And this is how it should look, because this is an homage to the Rolex Submariner date Starbucks 126610 LV. The bezel should be flush with the left-hand flank of the case, which is good. So they've got the diameter and proportions correct. The SD1953 gets it wrong because there's a lip. The bezel is too large. What they've done is they've increased the diameter of the bezel so it actually overhangs the left-hand flank of the case. Just bear with me, I'll get the camera to focus on it. So there's a slight bezel overhang, and it's noticeable because it really projects beyond the left-hand flank of the case. You can feel the lip of it, and it really is noticeable on wrist. You can see it as well as feel it. Now the strange thing is, when you look at the right-hand side of the right-hand flank of the case where the crown guards are, it doesn't project. So it's actually flush on the right-hand side with both of the flanks above and below the crown guards, as it should be, but on the left-hand flank it projects. So there's a noticeable change in the proportions. The diameter is incorrect. They've made the bezel slightly too large. Now, Pagani Design have got it correct because it's flush on the left side, and on the right side it's also flush. It doesn't project beyond the right-hand flanks above and below the crown guards, as per a Rolex Submariner date Starbucks. So the diameter and the proportions of the scalloped bezel on the PD-1661 are good. On the SD1953, they've made the bezel slightly too large in diameter, and the scalloped bezel projects too far, and it sticks out, and you really notice it. So those are the notable differences. 2.5 times magnification on the PD-1661 Cyclops magnifier, 3 times magnification. The bezel is too large on the SD1953. It's the right size on the PD-1661. So I'll show you both case backs, and then we'll look at the clasps and the bracelets in detail. Right, so firstly we'll look at the PD-1661 exhibition caseback. It's glazed with mineral crystal as a cost-cutting measure rather than sapphire, but that is acceptable at this price point. You don't need to have sapphire crystal in an exhibition caseback because rubbing against the wrist, this isn't going to scuff and scratch it. On the front of the piece you do need sapphire crystal to be scratch resistant. So mineral crystal is an acceptable cost-cutting measure. The stainless steel portion of the exhibition caseback is concentric CNC lathe tool machines to a good standard, and the circumference is mirror polished to a good standard. No sharp edges to the milled slots. The engraving is high definition and also polished to a good standard. No sharp edges to the engraving. The benefit of the exhibition caseback is it's very flat and low profile. It's not a large profile bubble back caseback, and of course it only provides 100 meters versus the 300 meters of hermetic seal on the SD1953, but in terms of comfort level, it's better. The smooth centre section, being mineral crystal glazed, feels very smooth and comfortable against the wrist. So I like it. The comfort is better. The finishing is excellent. And Pagani Design deserve credit because it does a good job of displaying the sterile NH35A, but it is very comfortable to wear because of its low profile proportions. Now, let's look at the SD1953 caseback in comparison. This is a lot thicker. If you look, you can see it has a very deep bubble back caseback. They've made the caseback too thick, and this is one of the main negatives of the SD1953. Yes, it is 300 meters of hermetic seal, which is stronger specification. The PD-1661 exhibition caseback only provides 100 meters. This is 3 times more water resistant, but they've made it very thick and it has a very deep profile to it. It doesn't need to have such a bubble back caseback profile to clear the rotor on an NH35A. They could have made it thinner and also lower profile, flatter in the center section. This bubble back profile really is very deep. Now, in terms of finishing, the engraving is aesthetically pleasing. They've engraved the emblem to a good standard. It's very nice to look at, and also the specification around the circumference, so it looks good. But the engraving feels sharp, it feels rough, and it scratches the wrist. So when you're wearing it, you are conscious of the fact it's not polished, it's not sterile. You can feel the sharp engraving. So there is room for improvement with regards to the finishing. They could polish the case back to remove some of the sharpness, the rough edges of the sharp engraving. The specification is engraved to a good standard, and it's also brushed satin finished to a good standard. So the brushed satin finishing is good, the engraving is good, they just need to polish it to deburr it better. But too thick, because this makes the piece stand off the wrist, and it also adds 2mm of thickness, making this watch 3.8mm thick versus the 12.9 of the PD-1661. So they've needlessly increased the thickness of this piece by 2mm simply by using a bubble back stainless steel case back. They could reduce this by 2mm by using a thinner case back and solve the problem. Finishing to the underside to the head of the piece is good. The male end links are a good tight fit to the head of the piece, no sharp edges to the undercuts. Now let's look at the finishing to the underside to the head of the PD-1661. Again, finishing is good to the underside to the head of the piece, no sharp edges to the undercuts to the flanks. The tips of the lugs are chamfered and deburred, no sharp edges. So they're very equal in terms of case finishing. Right, so let's look at the bracelets and also the clasps. So they both use oyster style bracelets, and as I've detailed, the main negative of the PD-1661, the SD1953 is the taper. Now, end links. Male end links, lateral side play, longitudinal play, up and down play in every single direction. Disappointing. So there's room for improvement with regards to the tolerances because we've got significant play in the end links. I'll just check the other side for continuity. Again, lateral side play, longitudinal play, up and down play in every single direction. And this is simply due to poor tolerances. The pin going through the centre link in the male end link should be an interference fit. The pin should be a tight fit with friction, but it's not. It's a loose, sloppy fit, as you can see, and it rattles. So let's compare the SD1953 end link. Again, male end links. Even more play, it rattles. Longitudinal, lateral, side to side, up and down play in every single direction. This has more play. So both of them have sloppy end links. I'll check the other side for continuity on the SD1953. It's worse. The tolerances are poorer on the SD1953. They've simply drilled the hole too large, or they've made the pin undersized for it to be an interference fit. It should be a tight friction fit, an interference fit sliding through the hole in the end link, but you can see the hole is too large or the pin is undersized, and therefore we get this excessive play. Longitudinal, lateral, side to side, it rattles, it clicks in every direction. So let's look at the two bracelet links. Now this one uses push pins, which is a clear cost cutting measure and a disappointment because the PD-1661 uses screw pins, which is better build quality. So as you can see, taper isn't enough. 20 to 18 makes it look too straight and parallel. It rattles. Every single one of the push pin bracelet links has significant play. Lateral play, longitudinal play, up and down play. And the cumulative effect across the length of the bracelet is it's very sloppy. You can hear it rattle on wrist. Let's check the other side. Same problem again. Lateral, longitudinal, up and down, side to side play. And we are looking at significant play in the push pins. Every single one of these push pin bracelet links has excessive play. And cumulatively across the length of the bracelet, it's a very sloppy bracelet. The positive is, because it's so loose, it does articulate freely. There's no stiff links. The links do not kink. Same applies to the male end links. They articulate freely because there's too much play on both the 6 o'clock and the 12 o'clock side. So the bracelet doesn't kink, no stiff links. The positive of the bracelet is there are no sharp edges. The top side and underside to the flanks, the top edge and lower edge are not sharp. They're deburred to a good standard and it doesn't pull arm hairs. So it's comfortable to wear, although it is sloppy and rattles. Let's examine the PD-1661 in comparison. Again, lateral, longitudinal, side to side play, up and down play in every single direction. Every single one of the screw pin links has too much play. Poor tolerances. These screw pins should be an interference fit. They should be tight in the holes. They should be a friction fit, not loose, but they are loose. And it rattles. The cumulative effect across the length of the bracelet is every single one of these screw pin links has too much play. Poor tolerances, poor build quality and quality control. Screw pins are better and the taper is better. 20 to 16 is perfection personified for an oyster style bracelet on a 40mm head of the piece. So taper is correct. Now the positive is no sharp edges to the top side, underside of the flanks. The brush satin finishing has a beautiful luster to it. Nice fine grained finish. The longitudinal brush satin finishing is good on the top side and underside, and the mirror polishing is flawless to the flanks. So the quality of the finishing in terms of the brush satin finishing and the mirror polishing is good on the bracelet, but the build quality and tolerances are poor. Same applies to the quality of the finishing to the SD1953. Brushed satin finishing is good, beautiful luster to it, nice fine grained finish, longitudinally brushed to a good standard on the top side and underside. The luster is good. The mirror polishing to the flanks is also good. Nicely mirror polished, no sharp edges to it. So both bracelets do not pull arm hairs, they do articulate freely, there's no stiff links, but which one is the better? Well, clearly they both have play, they're both sloppy bracelets, but overall I would say that the PD-1661 has the edge over the SD1953 oyster style bracelet because it has screw pins. The taper is better, and in terms of the play, there is slightly less play with the PD-1661. Let's look at the clasps. So, PD-1661 uses a flip block clasp. Now, let's look at the interior. Solid milled 316L grade stainless steel, as one would expect. Now, milled interior is Rolex style. Matte bead blasted effect to the left-hand portion, and the edges and the top side and underside and flanks are all mirror polished. Quality of the mirror polishing is very good. It's done to a good standard. No sharp edges, no burrs to the top side, underside and flanks, and no sharp corners to the tips of it. So it's well deburred and chamfered. The mirror polishing is good. Let's check the hinge pins. We have play, longitudinal, lateral, side to side, up and down play in every direction in the left-hand hinge pin. Centre pin also has play, poor quality interference fit. Longitudinal, lateral, up and down, side to side play in the centre hinge pin. Let's check the right pin. Same problem again. Longitudinal, lateral, side to side, up and down play in every direction in the right hand hinge pin. This is a disappointment. All three hinge pins have play, poor quality control, poor build quality, poor tolerances. So let's check the SD1953. Different style of bracelet, it's a flip block, but we also have two spring-loaded triggers and also 6 micro adjustment holes. Beautiful luster to it. The gauge is lighter, but the mirror polishing to the bevel is good. The brushed satin finishing to the top side and underside is good, and that contrasts with the flawless mirror polishing. So the finishing is good. No sharp edges, no burrs, doesn't have sharp corners to it. The PD-1661 clasp does have sharp corners and also a sharp edge on the end of it. The internal is solid milled 316L grade stainless steel, as one would expect. Longitudinal brushed satin finishing to the top side, underside and flanks. No sharp corners to it. It's deburred and chamfered to a good standard. So let's check the hinge pins. Left hand hinge pin has excessive lateral, longitudinal, side to side play, up and down play in every direction. Centre hinge pin, play again. Lateral, longitudinal, side to side, up and down play. Tolerances are poor. Let's check the right one. Same again. Longitudinal, lateral, side to side play in every single direction. So, all three hinge pins, left, centre and right, have excessive play. Same problem as the PD-1661, poor tolerances, poor build quality, poor quality control. There is room for improvement. But, on a positive note, I prefer the SD1953 bracelet because we have 6 micro adjustment holes. The holes in the flanks mean you can externally press a spring bar push pin into the spring bar, and you can easily adjust the 6 micro adjustments externally. It's a good system, it's user friendly. Now compare this to the internal adjustment, which we're all familiar with. This is a negative of the clasp that the Pagani design use. It only has 3 micro adjustment dimples internally inside the flanks. Now the problem is they have only milled 1 slot. You'll all have seen this before. If you look, I've opened the 5mm EasyLink style extension to show it to you. If you look inside the end link, you can see there's only 1 milled slot at the top of it. There's no milled slot in the bottom. The problem is you can't depress the spring bar at both ends. You can only depress the spring bar at the top end, not the bottom end. And that means it's very difficult to actually move the spring bar in the 3 dimples in the underside, in the inside of the flanks. So you can press in the top edge of the spring bar, the top end okay, the bottom end you can't. This makes it very difficult to move the end link in the bracelet in the 3 micro adjustment positions, the 3 dimples. You can depress the end of the spring bar at the top, but you can't get a spring bar tool at the bottom. It's a design defect. They should have milled 2 slots as per an end link in the head of the piece, and that would make it so much easier. So it's very difficult to adjust, and only 3 micro adjustments isn't enough. Now they've got this solid milled EasyLink style extension, which provides 5mm of on-the-fly adjustment, and it does click in with a nice positive click, and it does deploy with a nice positive click. So it's good. It works okay. Sometimes these are very tight, and it's the luck of the draw whether you get a good one or a bad one. This one is tight, but it does snap in and out very positively. But on some, they're very difficult to remove because they're just so tight, the tolerances are poor. So 5mm EasyLink extension is good, but the 3 micro adjustment dimples are not good. Now, with this, we don't have that problem because we simply have 6 micro adjustment holes. Plenty of adjustment, easy to press a spring bar tool in the external holes, very easy to adjust. So I like this. I think this is a better flip block bracelet. In terms of finishing, we've got Steeldive engraved on the flip block clasp and also the emblem, and it's done to a good standard. The proportions are good, and it looks good, and it works well. With the finishing to the PD-1661 clasp, Pagani design is engraved longitudinally. The brush satin finishing is good, but the negatives, 2 sharp corners, and they are very sharp. They will scratch your wrist. This edge here, the end of it, is razor sharp, so needs deburring to a better standard. The top side and underside to the flanks have been chamfered and deburred well. The top corners don't have sharp corners. They've chamfered them well. So, no sharp edges to the top corners, but the lower corners are very sharp. And this edge here, the end of it, is razor sharp. So they really need to deburr that to a better standard because it will scratch your wrist. So the undercut to the flanks is good, doesn't feel sharp, but the end is sharp. So the quality of the finishing on this is not as good. On the SD1953, it's better because the undercut to the flanks is deburred very well, and it's the end of it doesn't have that razor sharp edge, and the corners are chamfered, they're not sharp. So the quality of the finishing to the clasp on the SD1953 is a level above the PD-1661. Right, so let's test the bezel executions and also the crown executions. So 120 click unidirectional bezel, as one would expect. Now, thing to note is the PD-1661 bezel action is too light. Very light resistance to it. Lateral side-to-side play is a disappointment. We've also got back play, and the back play is significant. 1 click of back play. Now I'm just going to check it in 4 positions because when I level criticism at a brand, I like to be fair rather than unfair. I like to be unbiased. So, second position, 1 click of back play. Third position, 1 click of back play. Fourth position, 1 click of back play. It is wholly unacceptable to have 1 click of back play regardless of the price point of a piece. Yes, this is €78 in the low tier. One has to expect some cost-cutting measures, some quality control issues, but 1 click of back play is significant back play. Not good enough. Now, lateral side play is also excessive. So they need to tighten up the bezel execution. Very simple to do because they tighten up the click spring and that improves the resistance. This is too light. It feels too loose. Now it feels even all the way through the 360 degrees. It doesn't get tighter or looser, so that's the positive. But it rotates too freely. The problem is, if you rub against this accidentally, it's going to knock it out of position because that's how light it is. You can see if you just brush against it, it will flick it out of position. That's why you need a medium or firm rotation resistance, because otherwise, when you rub against the watch, it's easily going to flick out of position. It's not good enough. Now, let's check the alignment. Perfect. So, on a positive note, the Lume pip and triangle perfectly aligns with the 12 o'clock index and the 60-minute tick on the chapter ring. So, lateral side-to-side play, 1 click of back play, too light resistance, but aligns correctly. Let's compare it to the SD1953. So, same 120 click unidirectional bezel as one would expect, same ceramic bezel insert, but this one isn't inlaid with white paint, it's inlaid with BGW9, which we'll test in the Lume test. So already the SD1953 has the edge over the PD-1661 because we're using a fully lumed bezel rather than white paint. Now, nice, medium, firm resistant. Feels similar to a Seiko 5KX, which you'll be familiar with, or alternatively a San Martin SN017G, which you'll also be familiar with. Nice, medium, firm resistance. Feels even all the way through the 360 degrees, so it's good. Feels more solid. I like the ratcheting mechanism. Nice, heavy, audible clicks. no lateral side-to-side play, no back play, tighter bezel execution. Let's check the alignment. Feels even all the way through the 360 degrees. One more click. Perfect. The Lume's triangle fully aligns correctly with the 12 o'clock index and the 60-minute tick on the chapter ring. So it's good. No lateral side-to-side play, no back play, perfect alignment, firmer resistance, medium firm resistance. This is a better bezel execution. The SD1953 has the edge over the PD-1661 bezel execution. Let's test both of these screw-down crown executions. Solid 316L grade stainless steel crown, coin edge finished, nice chamfer to it, no sharp edges to the tips of the coin edge teeth. And it's engraved with a Pagani design shield to a good standard, matte speed blasted background, which contrasts with a mirror polished Pagani design shield. So the quality of the finishing to the crown is good. However, negative is proportions are incorrect. They've made the crown too large. Now, they updated the PD-1661 crown. Early versions had a lower profile crown, which was more like the proportions of a Rolex Submariner date Starbucks crown, which this is an homage to. But for some reason, Pagani design made the crowns larger on the PD-1661. They updated the crowns. They made it far too large. Look how far the crown projects beyond the crown guards. So it should be recessed into the case more. It should be lower profile. This is too large. And it really does look out of proportion to the crown guards, so that's the negative. Let's test the action. Now it feels smooth, but it's not silky smooth. There is friction. It feels smooth enough. It unscrews okay, but you can feel the resistance of two things. The threading, the internal thread meshing against the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. You can feel the friction. You can also feel the friction of the rubber O-rings, because there's one rubber O-ring gasket inside the crown and a second rubber O-ring gasket inside the stainless steel crown tube. The two rubber O-rings provide a hermetic seal to 100 meters. But you can feel the friction, so it's not silky smooth. There's room for improvement with regards to the tolerances and the quality control. So when it's unscrewed, we're now in the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the Seiko NH35A automatic to its maximum 41-hour power reserve. You can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up, feels nice and smooth, nice firm resistance to it. I like the winding of the NH35A. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set complication. Now if you look closely at the Cyclops magnifier and the date complication, you can see it clicks over to the next day of the month with a nice positive click. That's something I really like about the NH35A, the heavy, solid, positive indexing. It feels very good to click over to the next day of the month. The 2.5 times magnification works well. It's the correct magnification, doesn't over magnify. The alignments of the Arabic numerals on the date wheel are correct. They're not too far to the left or right. The quality of the printing is good, it's sharp, it's not blurry, and the font used isn't too thick. So they've used the correct fonts, the proportions are good, the magnification is right. Pulling it out to the second click hacks the movement. We're now in the time setting position. So it's possible to set the time precisely to the second. If you look at the second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead. Nice medium firm resistance to the gearing. Minimal back play. When you rotate the crown clockwise and anti-clockwise, the minute hand does respond, but there is slight back play, which is a characteristic of the NH35A. It is acceptable. It's a robust movement. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. Let's test screwing it back down. Immediate thread pickup. So there's a perfect interface, a perfect pickup between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. The tolerances are good, but they could be refined because it's not silky smooth, although it is smooth enough. But the proportions are incorrect. It sticks out too far. Now, compare it to the proportions of the SD1953 screw-down crown. You can see it's better. The crown is more recessed into the crown guards and it's smaller. It doesn't stick out so much. So it looks more like a Rolex Submariner date Starbucks, which this is an homage to. The crown is not oversized. It doesn't project too far proud of the right-hand edge of the crown guards. So they've got it better done. It's got the same coin edge finishing to it, same chamfer, no sharp tips to the teeth of the coin edge finishing, and again we have a matte speed blasted background with a mirror polished Steeldive emblem. So the quality of the engraving is good, finishing is good. So let's test the action. No discernible difference. It feels smooth, but it's not silky smooth. Again, you can feel the friction of the internal thread of the stainless steel crown meshing with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. So there's room for refinement. You can also feel the friction of the rubber O-rings. This also has 2 rubber O-rings. One rubber O-ring inside the crown, a second rubber O-ring gasket inside the crown tube. So 300 meters is stronger specification. This has a better hermetic seal. The PD-1661 only has 100 meters on the crown. This has 300, 3 times more water resistant. That's something to bear in mind. So manually winding feels exactly the same, no discernible difference because they use the same NH35A automatic. Feels smooth, medium resistance. You can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. Feels very good. Pulling it out to the first click position, hacks the movement. Let's check the quick set complication. Feels exactly the same, but as I've detailed, 3 times magnification is a mistake. It's over magnified. If you look at the proportions of the Arabic numerals, I'm just going to move the minute hand out of the way so you can see it better. So look at the Arabic numerals. We're now on the 24th. Rotating anti-clockwise brings it to the 25th. So nice positive clicking, but the Arabic numerals are too large. They're distorted inside the Cyclops magnifier. They're over magnified. It should be 2.5. This is 3 times magnification. And it magnifies the font too large. It actually makes the Arabic numerals look too big. And that reduces the clarity, the legibility. It doesn't enhance it. 2.5 is optimum as per Rolex, but 3 is just too much. Steeldive should amend this. They should correct it to 2.5 as per the PD-1661. So I think that the PD-1661 Cyclops magnifier has the edge over the SD1953 because it's 2.5 times correct magnification versus 3, which is incorrect. Pulling it out to the second click position hacks the movement. We're now in the time setting position. No discernible difference. Medium resistance to the gearing. Minimal backplay. Feels good. So I like it. The NH35A is a pleasure to use. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click and that restarts the movement. Let's test screwing it back down. Feels exactly the same, no discernible difference. There's an immediate thread pickup. The internal thread of the stainless steel crown perfectly meshes with the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. So it feels smooth, but it's not silky smooth. There is some friction to the threading and there is some friction to the gaskets. But most importantly, let's look at the proportions. As I've detailed, compare the crown which sticks out too far. This is too large. They've made a mistake with the PD-1661. The crown is far too large. It's oversized. SD1953, far better proportions. It's recessed into the crown guards more, plus it's shorter, it's lower profile. So the proportions of the screw down crown on the SD1953 better match the proportions of the crown guards. The PD-1661, far too big, it sticks out too far. So of the two, the SD1953 has the edge, it's better, as you can see. Too large on the left with the PD-1661, the correct size on the right with the SD1953. Right, so let's do a lume test of both pieces and we'll see how the lume performs when they're charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge them up to the absolute peak. So I'll charge up the PD-1661 first and then I'll charge up the SD1953 and we'll look at them side by side to see which is the best. Now that's charged. I'm going to charge up the SD1953. That's now fully charged. So both are now fully charged to their absolute maximum. Clearly, the SD1953 has the edge over the PD-1661. On the left, we're looking at blue Luminova. This is not BGW9. Pagani Design are using a production cost-cutting measure of using 3 to 4 layers of blue Luminova, not 5 to 6 layers of BGW9. Luminova doesn't perform as brightly. The exciter in blue Luminova is not as bright as the exciter in BGW9 Super Luminova. It's less expensive. There's another negative. If you look at the Lume pip on the ceramic bezel insert of the PD-1661, it's a colour tone mismatch. It looks more like BGW9. So they've used BGW9 on the Lume pip on the ceramic bezel insert on the PD-1661 on the left, but it doesn't match the blue tone of the Luminova. And as you can see, on the Mercedes handset and the applied indices on the PD-1661 in blue Luminova, they're fading and fading fast. This is poor quality performance, at the €78 price point. Now, on the right, I want to give due credit to Steeldive. The SD1953 has outstanding BGW9 Super Luminova performance. Perfect colour tone match between the ceramic bezel insert, which is fully lumed, the applied indices and the Mercedes handset. Blue tone matches, we're clearly looking at 5 to 6 layers. This is not 3 to 4 layers as a cost-cutting measure. We're clearly looking at 5 to 6. They also deserve credit, Steeldive, because they have used a fully loomed ceramic bezel insert. The 15-minute ticks, the Arabic numerals and the triangle are fully loomed, which is more expensive. The production cost is higher, but these two pieces are the same price point, €78 and €80 respectively. This is something that often collectors complain about and they would happily pay more for with the Pagani design PD-1661. Like many of their watches, they use poor quality blue luminova rather than good quality BGW9 Super Luminova, and it is a production cost cutting measure to maximise profit margin per piece. Steeldive really deserve credit because they haven't taken the same cost cutting measure. You can see this is not fading whatsoever. The exciter is glowing brightly and it will continue to glow for a good length of time. This is 10 out of 10 performance on the fully loomed ceramic bezel insert, the applied indices and the Mercedes hands. Excellent quality. It really is outstanding. In terms of performance, there's no discernible difference between the SD1953 and the San Martin SN017G, which is a much more expensive piece, but it uses the same quality of BGW9. We're looking at the same 5 to 6 layers as you get with the San Martin SN017G. So the 1953 clearly has the edge over the PD-1661. Massive difference in performance. Disappointing from Pagani design and very impressive from Steeldive. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. Now, they both use the same movement. The Seiko NH35A automatic, which is made in Malaysia. It has 24 joules, hand winding and hacking, which use for complications. Also has a quick set date complication, which works well, as I've demonstrated. The NH35A runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. And it has a stated accuracy of -20 to +40 seconds per day, so rather wide accuracy range. However, I'm pleased to report that Pagani design are well regulating the NH35As they're using. This one is running consistently at +6 seconds per day, which is well within the -20 to +40 seconds per day stated accuracy. The Steeldive uses the exact same movement, and this one is regulated to +10 seconds per day, so not as accurate, but +10 is still within the stated -20 to +40 seconds per day. So +6 on the PD-1661, +10 on the SD1953. Similar accuracy, same movements. Now, I think that they could improve upon that, both brands, because it is possible to regulate the NH35A to ±5 seconds per day, but +6 on the PD-1661 is close to that. +10 is slightly fast, but it is acceptable. The NH35A is reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. It's been in service since 2011, so at this stage it's well-proven. No reliability issues. The build quality control, materials are very good. Feels good to manually wind. Quick set complication works well. Hand winding and hacking works well. No negatives to it other than it is a thick movement and therefore it has a tall cannon pinion stack height, and as I've detailed, often NH35A powered pieces have a deep stainless steel rehaut, as both of these pieces do. So that's really the negative, and it's something that the Miyota 9015 has the edge over it, because you don't need to have this deep rehaut, and that's something you just have to put up with an NH35A powered piece. So lastly, I'll summarise both pieces. What do I think of them overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So these are the same price point in the low tier, going head to head. €78 versus €80, exactly the same price point. Of the two, overall, there are positives and negatives. The negative of the SD1953 is the 3 times magnification of the Cyclops magnifier. The 2.5 times on the PD-1661 is better. The PD-1661 has a better bracelet taper, 20 to 16 versus 20 to 18. Less play on the PD-1661 bracelet, and it has screw pins. The bracelet is better. This has more play, but I prefer the Clasp on the SD1953 because the 6 micro adjustments on the flanks are easy to use, no sharp edges or corners. PD-1661 has a sharp edge plus sharp corners, difficult to use the 3 micro adjustments. So better Clasp on the SD1953, better bracelet on the PD-1661. So they have positives and negatives. Now, above all else, the bezel execution on the SD1953 has the edge over the PD-1661. It's tighter, no back play, no lateral side-to-side play, better quality bezel execution. The screw-down crowns feel the same. In terms of comfort level, the PD-1661 is more comfortable because it's lighter at 152 grams versus 179. Feel-good factor is similar. They both look exactly the same, 40mm pieces with the green Starbucks bezel, but comfort level is better with the PD-1661 due to the smooth exhibition caseback versus the sharp engraving of the SD1953. The other thing to notice, this is thicker and it's noticeable. It's 13.8 versus 12.9 of the PD-1661. So this is better balanced, more comfortable. This is heavier and it feels thicker on the wrist. Of the two, the SD1953 has the edge for the simple reason the quality of the BGW9 on the SD1953 is 10 out of 10. Fully Lume ceramic bezel inserts, perfect colour tone match between the applied indices and the Mercedes hands. This is excellent BGW9, the same quality as on the San Martin SN017G, which is more expensive. Big disappointment from the PD-1661 because we have weak blue lumen over and there's a colour tone mismatch because the lume pip doesn't match the dial and hands. So of the two pieces, the SD1953 is the better piece. For the even money, this is the better watch. The lumen over is better. It has AR coating. The PD-1661 doesn't have AR coating. So I would be magnanimous about the play in the bracelet and the incorrect taper and also the 3x magnification because better bezel execution, better quality BGW9. So I'm going to declare the SD1953 a champagne watch for lemonade money, and I'm going to highly recommend it to you for consideration. I hope you've enjoyed my comparison of the Pagani design PD-1661 Starbucks versus the Steeldive SD1953 Starbucks. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.